Now I get the distinct pleasure of introducing myself as the final speaker for this session. So yeah, I have the talk to close it out. We'll have a few minutes for questions, hopefully at the end before the session finishes. Yeah, sometime before 10 to 12. So yeah, my name is Ben Kirman. Yeah, nice to meet you all. And as Dirk introduced me earlier at the start of this session, is my background isn't in theatre at all. It's in games design and games development. So as you can see behind me, a huge range of like different kinds of board games and computer games and all sorts. So I'm kind of a sort of a newcomer to this world. And really, although it was with some trepidation, it was become clear to me that kind of play is central to a lot of the work. You know, not just in the terminology, but also in the way that people work. There's been kind of a lot more alignments than I expected. So what I'd like to talk about today is a series of different kind of projects that we've been working on in the Digital Creativity Labs. So the Digital Creativity Labs is an interdisciplinary research group. It's funded by the UK government and the Universities of York, as well as Goldsmiths and Falmouth in the UK. There's a bunch of really interesting work going on there, but we are academics. So as academics, there is something of a problem. And that problem is this. It's, as academics, you know, we do a lot of cool and interesting work. We get really excited to share it with everybody. We share lots of diagrams with arrows pointing all over the place between different boxes and so many graphs, right? But sometimes perhaps we forget to answer like a really important question. And that question is so what? Like, what does this mean? Like, how can we use this? And in my experiences with Play On and other projects so far, is for an audience of creative practitioners to think less of presenting work as like ends of things, but rather as the start of things and the opportunity to engage with new kinds of projects. So that's the idea of today's talk. So what I wanted to do was introduce the variety of work that's happening in Digital Creativity Labs. But it's to cut out of the boring bits, really. I don't want to tell you too much about the complexities of the technology or, you know, the things that have already happened, but rather to focus on the cool stuff and especially the sparks and the opportunities for future work, especially. So invitations for collaboration, some conversation, and a lot of shared technology and potential for different kinds of co-production, both within Play On project and more broadly as well. And I promise there's no graphs in my talk as well. So this is filtered also through this lens of the Play On umbrella theme of concrete utopias. So I've chosen to talk especially about projects that align well with this theme. There's a lot going on. Digital Creativity Labs is a big group, but I've chosen to pick out a handful of projects that are particularly interesting in this context. And also, especially for partners of Play On, we're starting to plant those seeds of ideas for future co-productions. So perhaps there are some people, some projects and tools that can start like developing some thinking, maybe build some connections and kindle something for later. Naturally, this invitation is extended to all the friends we've met and the friends we will meet at HOPE over the last few days and today. So, onto this series of Digital Creativity Sparks. So the way I formatted this is a collection of very short videos, 1 minute, 1.5 minute videos that bring some unique perspective, demonstrate some kind of technology or approach that I think is linked to concrete utopias. I have cut down these very long videos to focus explicitly just on the cool parts to keep it short, but also as an invitation to work with them in the future. So these aren't all my projects, it's from a variety of different people. However, of course, I'm happy to put you in contact and speak with them. So we're going to begin with a quiet project. So this is a project about the sounds of the concrete utopia. So this is quite a simple, a technical project really, but a really interesting idea, which is that there's an app that takes people on a tour of familiar places through following sounds and seeking silence. So the app, when in use, directs the user to move around based on listening to the background noise. And in this way, it brings us new perspective on places. So this is obviously linked to ideas of like flannery or like an audio situationism. And it generates a musical score based on this unique and personal journey that's taken by the user. So for me, I think this is really a reminder of the sublime and simplicity. So really the rich and exciting nature of the places that are already around us when we see them or we hear them from a different perspective. So the app is simple, but the story and the world around it is quite complex. And so I wanted to introduce this as a digital creativity spark, as something to think about, and as something that's worth hanging on to, is that a way to bring us away from screens and using technology to engage us more with the world around us rather than distracting us from it. So of course, the environment's not always so grey, and I've got the next project, which is about storytelling in nature, and it's a project called The Vole's Tale. So another video.
The University of York and Yorkshire Wildlife Trust have been working together to develop and further our knowledge of Askham Bog.
It's uniquely rich in biodiversity. It has more species for its size than any other nature reserve in Yorkshire. We think we're getting probably around 30,000 people a year coming around this place, which makes it a really big visitor attraction.
What's unique about the Vole's Tale project is this opportunity to be immersed in a story, but to hear this directly from the wildlife that inhabits the bog.
Audio experiences, like a good book, can really place us within a particular sound world or a particular story world.
It's got this amazing boardwalk, which is about a kilometre round, where you can walk through and see the different habitats, see different wildlife. You can see birds, you see a lot of insects, a lot of butterflies.
The Askham Bog project was particularly challenging in terms of the location and the subject matter, but also lent itself to bring another dimension to the visitor experience and to the educational experience around that particular place, enabling an audience to develop empathy with a particular subject or person, or in this case an animal, and particular environmental issues. And so it's a really powerful way of telling a story and use audio as the means for doing that.
This is an experience that we can tap into from the technology that we've got in our pocket.
It's down to you as the visitor to engage with what we designed for you, delivering content directly to their ears that almost curated for that individual, that can be enjoyed and experienced both on-site and off-site. So the work that we do has a legacy for the visitor beyond their actual engagement with the site on the day that they visit.
This depth of history is unique almost, and you can make so many stories about what has been going on here, and we're always discovering more about it.
So to be able to not only immerse somebody in a fantastic and unique landscape, but an incredible story, is a fantastic opportunity.
So where the quiet walk works in all kinds of different places, it responds to the place you're in. The Vole's Tale is really about one specific and perhaps hidden corner of the world that is rich with these invisible stories. And actually, you know, following the excellent examples given by the CGO map team during HOPE yesterday and the day before, is that I think the spark here is really clear, is that in telling like stories tied to places, we don't capture ourselves within a screen, but use it as a way to connect us further to the world around it. Now, from a very quiet place to a very noisy one, this is a short video looking at some of the technology created in the Weaver project. And Weaver is a project around esports, which is computer games that are played competitively in giant arenas. So that's a project about esports, and esports are really an amazing phenomenon, really. So there's not only these arenas, as you saw in the video, with thousands of people watching live inside a stadium, watching people play video games on a stage. But they're also the pioneers in hybrid interactions, which is that the people in the stadium are joined virtually by tens or hundreds of thousands of more people following matches online using services like Twitch, but also social media. And there's a whole frenzy of communication between the match and the real space and the virtual space and the social spaces around it. And I think this is really interesting for us, which is it's about engaging audiences around a story happening in stage. So not just inside an auditorium, but more broadly, enhancing through personalization. So as each person has different aspects they might find interesting. And I think this is the spark here for me, is around connecting audiences over space and time, and the opportunities in storytelling around the stage, not necessarily just purely on the stage as well. So next is the Mutator project, which is a long-running project from artist and a member of Digital Creativity Labs, William Latham. So if you're my age, you might remember William Latham from his trippy organic art, which used to be on the cover discs of old computer magazines in the 1990s. But recently he's still been doing this work, but he's been engaging much more with immersive technology.
Mutator is a VR experience where the viewer puts on a Vive HTC headset and they're literally taken into another dimension. When the viewer puts on the VR headset for the first time, their reality is replaced by our 3D organic space. In the mutation vortex, they suddenly see strange organic forms swimming up to them, a bit like a diver diving at night with fish. These things come up to you and interact with you. As things swim past you, they get louder. Audio dimension is very, very important. It increases the sense of depth. Then in mutation space, you're placed in a room which has got lots of psychedelic texture, and then there's this giant form that looks like a strange sea anemone right in the middle of this room with you. So the controllers have two triggers. In mutation space, you press a trigger, the form starts to mutate and change shape. You pull another trigger, and the world either becomes enormous or becomes tiny. Ultimately, using these controllers, they control the environment around them. With this exhibition, we have a wide audience. It's not just your normal, narrow, niche art audience. People are very interested in the idea of entering a kind of alien world and what they're going to experience in VR.
I think this is a really big contrast to some of the projects I've shown, because it's about a totally alien and a replacement space. And that's why I really want to share it, because it takes the place of the real world entirely. And so for me, it's a spark of an idea that that liberates, really. So we don't think of virtual reality as something that's necessarily a recreation of a real world environment, but you know, there's this hyper detailed creations of familiar things. But instead, there's opportunities to create and explore possibilities of totally unfamiliar, alien, and impossible and wondrous new dimensions. And yeah, really kind of embrace the potential of this technology to explore new spaces. And next, back to the real world, and this is about data and storytelling.
Here, the audience is invited to not only view, but shape the narrative of a love story. They affect what happens as the video itself changes to complement the viewer's individual responses.
How am I feeling today?
Every so often, floating icons are projected in space in front of the screen, subtly encouraging onlookers to reach out and virtually guide the mood of the production. Well, that's the idea anyway. A leap motion sensor tracks hand movements, and depending where and when you intervene, different pre-recorded scenes play out. The installation uses a storytelling medium known as object-based media.
We spent about a year developing some underlying technology. These three groups are all different dialogue choices, and based on the decision that the viewer makes, it will go down one of these paths, and then it will select from these possibilities.
So a little bit of a graph there by mistake. It was just sort of hidden in interface, so apologies. But this is actually some open source software that's been created by Digital Creativity Labs members, so not necessarily focusing on this particular implementation of it, but a software that's available to work with branching media that changes based on data, so that can be user choice or something else. So something I wanted to highlight was this link here to Brook Leave Home, which is another project using this software. It's about people leaving the care system, so care experienced young people in England, and the difficulties that they face, which change based on where in the country they are based. So different local authorities and different councils support care leavers in different ways, more or less. And so there's an online story that responds based on where you are or where you want to find out more about. So I wanted to bring this project back and reintroduce it, because as a Spark, it's like thinking about interactions as something broader than just like a decision of left or right, or choose a choice in that manner, but also thinking about the ways that the data around us, or the perception of the environment which we're based, can be used to enrich stories and change stories around the user rather than within the user. So the next is the movement toolkit. Hopefully. Oh, try that again. Oh, my fault. That's okay. I'm not getting that video working, but that's okay. So I'll move on. But basically, the movement toolkit is a motion toolkit. It's again open source software that's available to be used. That is about tying like motion, so movement into audio specifically. And I think that the spark here is really clear, which is it's the potential for engaging audience members and also performances in interfering with audio in like a really playful way. So it uses very simple devices that can be made very cheaply, that can interfere with the audio and just create this kind of unique kind of experience that isn't over developed and over thought through. It's very responsive and playful, and sort of maintains that spirit for the audience. So the next project is by the composer Martin Suckling, who did this project in collaboration with the Scottish Ensemble and the Scottish Dance Theatre. So this is another one of those projects that's kind of hard to share in this kind of video format, because you really need to experience it for yourself. So if I share the link, something to visit a bit later perhaps, which is a personalized dance and performance, but with a particular focus on layers. So when you go to the site, you decide on the different combinations of layers, and you'll receive this personalized performance that really shifts the meaning and the texture based on your selection. And so for me, the spark here, what I really like about this project is this idea of layered approaches to narrative. So rather than thinking about telling stories and offering interaction in stories as being a change in direction over time, but instead of thinking about interactions and changes in texture or parallel shifts in a story rather than a linear one. So now Martin's already working on the follow-up project for this, which is an opera that takes place entirely in the dark, using this technology to build up a layered, personalized experience. Here is one without a video, because it's so new that it's happening right now in another part of the internet. So Mary Stewart David and Daniel Locke are a writer and technologist, respectively, and in the Digital Creativity Labs. And they're currently experimenting with a new project where they're looking at the metaverse and musical theatre. So musical theatre has this particular technical issues when we're dealing with sort of remote performers and remote audiences, which is especially things like the technical complexity of aligning the singing and the music when there are like delays in the network, for example, but also because the systems built are for, because the systems built are for voice, and they're not meant for singing. They're meant for speech. So they're working currently this week on these experiments in scenography and with the technology and the storytelling, and they're using the Frame VR platform. So if you have a headset and are interested in visiting with them, I'd really encourage you to contact Mary. So I've got an email address on the next slide. It's a complicated email address, but you can also contact me and I'll forward you on. I know that they're there in the virtual space this week experimenting, and I know tomorrow between 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. CET, they'll be doing sort of demos if you want to drop in for a guided tour. But also after this week, it will remain online for people to explore at their leisure, just without the kind of the live aspect. So finally, and since the timer went off, that's probably a good final thing to be talking about, is this Play on Mobile toolkit. So as partners know, we're using a mobile app previously in one of the Play on projects with Abando. It's called Football, and it had the mobile application as part of the ways in which the audience could engage with the show. And there's been some interest in using apps and different kinds of features in apps in performances in Play On and more broadly. So what I thought I'd do is put together quite a simple demo application that showcases a series of different features. So I've got a really short video here that's going to show you what the app looks like. It uses some 360 video, accesses some location information, and also has some simple remote features such as reaction link integration, for example, and a voting system. So here's what the app looks like, and I've integrated it with some 360 video, which is interactive and can have buttons placed in 360 spaces. I've also put in some location features. I've blurred out my home address there, which is using the local place and the environment around you as part of the experience. And I've also built this control panel to show how you can connect a mobile to a control system used by a member of a production crew. So in this case, we've got, we can change things in the app live from the control panel, such as the color or the messages. There's also a voting system that there's like a simple recreation of a reaction link style thing. It's not as complex, but it allows people to vote and then get feedback real time. And it also allows for things like notifications and receiving messages while users aren't using the app. And so what I'll do is I'll share that with everybody separately, so that you can download the app and you can try it out, and you can use the control panel to send notifications to everybody else. And I really wanted to just put this together as something simple and playful to begin with. So it's a disparate set of features, but they're all capable of being combined in different ways. So for example, we might trigger a story event in a 360 video when more than 10 audience members are within 50 meters of a pub. So we'll share that directly with partners, but the invitation is open to everybody. So if you're not in Play On and are interested in playful mobile interaction as a way to engage with storytelling, I have a number of licenses that I can share with people more broadly. Wow. Okay. Wow. That was kind of a lot. I went through 9 different projects really quickly by someone who gets too excited and has been told repeatedly to not talk so quickly. So apologies, everybody. You might have already forgotten some of the first ones, but I think that's fine. The aim of these rapid talks is really just to give these sparks. So it's not demos. I don't want you to remember all the details about all the finer aspects of these projects. These aren't ends. These are starts. They're potentials. I think there's a bunch of different ways that we can think about new interactions, and many different kinds of software that can help. But the focus is always on looking forwards and not looking at what's been done, but looking at how we can use this in the future. Thank you, and I'm sorry for speaking so quickly, Dirk.
Wonderful. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ben. I'm really flashed by all the sparks. But we also got some questions. First is cutting room and movement toolkit. Which open source tools have been used?
So that's a good question, and that's probably a question directed at the project owners. So that would be Mari and Ursu in the case of Cutting Room, and Alessandro Altavia in the case of the Movement Toolkit. But I do know that all the software is on GitHub, so you can investigate the actual implementations and how you could work with that. So the website address for Digital Creativity Labs is on the screen there. So digitalcreativity.ac.uk. that you might follow to get more details, or I can put you in contact with them directly too.
Okay, and we just got a feedback from David, and by the way, thanks, really was a wonderful talk, David. And David is writing Cutting Room is its own open source project. Volt's Tale, Ben, is it right that is audio and augmented reality in a combination?
No, so that one's just audio. In the video, the animations are I think just for the aid of the video and to help place it there. But it's there's no augmented reality, but because it's trying to engage you more with space.
Yeah. Okay. But there's a tracking system behind it for the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, so in that case, it uses the GPS because it's in a fairly remote place. It's out it's in a bog. There's not so much there's not so much infrastructure there to cope with that. So GPS is used.
Okay. And then for movement toolkits, the engagement of audience.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be possible also to have it outside, or is it only something which you can use indoor?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the technical details of it, I would leave up to the developer. But from my understanding and from what I've seen of the thing, it needs to be near some kind of base station. So there needs to be a way to communicate. But that's not a complicated infrastructure. That can be something that's remote, held on a laptop or a tablet, for example.
Okay. So, we are anyhow a bit in a delay. I think that was only a beginning of our talks. And thanks again, Ben, for these great inputs. And I think that these 9 examples, these 9 sparks you offered us, I think that should be starting point for our further discussions regarding the third production. And for sure, when we meet each other here in Berlin in June, that will be the intro for our talks there.